We'd love to see that at higher resolution. Here's a field of layers and layers of rectangular objects, bigger ones on smaller and smaller and smaller. Here is an interesting object that looks very much at high resolution like what might have been an abandoned quarry or a water reservoir, because of there's even an absence of cratering on the berm and other features to suggest that it was carved. Here is a region of Mars that's pretty mountainous with valleys in between. We come to one valley and we look at that in high resolution, and we not only see some very bright objects that have more than natural reflectivity, but they tend to be rather linearly laid out and squarish. This is a possible remnant of something interesting. If it were on Earth, we'd be rushing there to look at the ruins of some ancient Indian civilization or whatever. Here's, again, a set of interesting objects, triangular in shape. Some think they aren't triangles at all. They're obelisks standing up and casting shadows. But is that any less anomalous? And they aren't random at all. As you can see, they tend to lie along arcs. There are lots of other similar features seen in other places on Mars. We don't know what to make of these, but we'd sure like to get a close-up look. Here's an interesting object. You don't often see hexagonal craters inside of other craters. And if this is seen in higher resolution as we did, we see that around it are these white bands between the outer crater and the inner crater, the row of white bands. We'll see more examples of those bands in a moment. And inside the hexagonal crater, it almost looks like the sculptor's inscription, doesn't it? Speaking of symbols, there are places on Mars where we see things of a definitely symbolic character, as here, and in the black markings here, which is again in the Cydonia area. Of course, if those really are symbols and not accidents of nature, then we are talking about, without any question, the activity of an intelligent civilization, though not necessarily an indigenous one, to Mars. There are other kinds of features too, and this begins a discussion of the features that have these white lines to them, the white bands. They tend to line other interesting features. This one lies along a feature that we call the seahorse. I'll show in a moment. This is another one that's specifically in the Cydonia area. Both of these are in Cydonia, but these features like this with the bands are seen over wide areas of Mars. Not all areas, but over areas that are spaced by as much as 1,000 kilometers. We discovered from the patterns of seeing many of them that they are actually mostly subterranean features, and we only see the white bands when something has washed away the topsoil and we see what's slightly below the surface. And there are other cases where there's been substantial erosion and we can see deeper below the surface, as in this area, with the left band seen in higher resolution over here, magnified view. Here we see crevices where the soil has been eroded away, and of course the soil is weakest where these tubes have occurred, and that's why it washes away preferentially there. And we see that the features that we have now come to nickname glassy tubes are present. They have junctures such as this. They go off in different directions, always toward interesting things. And they have the white bands, and the white bands wrap all the way around. You can possibly see that faintly here between the top bands, and on the underside you can see where the bands go all the way around and are seen faintly through them. So they are translucent as well as the bands wrapping all the way around. And down here, that's an image of this spot. That's a specular reflection of sunlight And again, specular reflections don't occur off natural surfaces, they occur off glassy or metallic surfaces or plastic surfaces, suggesting again artificial materials. There are lots of these things. This one shows its very glassy character with shorter white bands with specular reflections. This one is on another plateau at Cydonia. We see a number of them here, seeing them close up here. We see them casting shadows into the ravine. So they are definitely high features well off the ground. They're not sand dunes, they're not lava tubes as has been proposed, and we'll see some of these features prove that can't be the case. Here's a Y branch, and here's again these things often go off in different interesting directions. Here's places where the surface has been eroded away, and we can see a nest of these things beneath the surface in this area. Here we are back to Cydonia. There's the face again, and this is the fortress feature I mentioned earlier. I mentioned that these glassy tubes tend to join interesting places. Well, here's why I say that. Notice here in the fortress image, see that there's a little dark mark here, which is actually it looks like an excavation coming out of the fortress. Let me enlarge that briefly. Sorry. Let me try that again. Typically 50 meters in diameter, possibly up to 100 in places. Oops, sorry, that's not the right one. I went back. Oh, I beg your pardon, I'm going the wrong way. All right, I wanted to do the enlargement on this, but my control isn't working at the moment. But I'll show the inset down here so you can see it. This is a very high resolution view of just this small portion right here. And we see that this is the shadowed edge of the triangular part of the fortress, what looks like the back wall right here and its shadow. And this is the dark object that seems to be coming out of it, and it's a glassy tube. But it disappears below the surface about so far out. Well, we now have infrared images of this area, and infrared can detect things just slightly below the surface. And with the infrared view, we've been able to trace where this tube goes. And it doesn't just go anywhere randomly. It comes out of the fortress and follows this path down right. It comes out of the middle of the fortress wall here, follows a path down to the middle of the mesa below the face. So it follows this path. And when we examine it with much higher resolution than you can see on this view, we can see that there is a fainter tracing of a tube that goes up and does the same thing to the face. So the mesas are joined by glassy tubes. Here is a low-resolution view of an interesting crater where there are a number of fissured cracks around it. One that seems to completely surround the crater, and one that's sort of coming by and sort of branches off to join the crack around the crater and then goes on its way down to the next interesting place. And here's where we have one of those that's a low-resolution view. Here's where we took the high-resolution strip image, so we only got this part of the view, and here's what it looks like, and it's clearly a junction of glassy tubes. So apparently, if these things follow the crevices, they just go in and circle the crater for whatever reason, and then they go on to other places in the distance. Always interesting places. Here is a case where the surface has been well eroded away again, and we can see structures of glassy tubes. This one is especially interesting because look at this place. Here's a glassy tube and here's a glassy tube. Here the white bands are going this way, east-west, and here they're going, or I should say north-south. Here they're going east-west. At this point they're perpendicular, and we can see the cross-check pattern one tube crossing the other, showing that they are translucent. You can see the one below the other. And certainly there are no way that sand dunes or lava tubes can be mutually perpendicular at the same place at the same time.